Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Woohoo! I'm going to the county fair. I'm going to the county fair any minute now. I'm waiting for my friend to come over, and then we're going to go. It's the final day of the fair. I've been trying to go for 10 days. Nobody will go with me because I don't have any friends. And then I finally tricked someone into going with me tonight. So that's the plan. Finally, get to see some aminals, some beautiful animals. It's a huge fair, the Erie County Fair. But that's not why I came on. I had a really super duper cool dream. Make of it what you will. Certainly felt cosmic to me, certainly felt connective, and I'm going to try to blow through it pretty quick before she gets here. I When I woke up at 8 a.m., I texted the details to my mom because I either had to write them down anyway to try to remember as much as I could, or to write it up. I had to write it up either way or dictate it into my phone. So I wrote this super long text to my mom, which that's what I'll start with, and then I'll elaborate as we go. So this was, I've been having these dreams about creation and the creation of souls, but some of the dreams have been kind of like negative, and I hate to have to keep coming on. Well, I don't have to come on and share them with you, but I would much rather bring you a beautiful dream about creation, and that's what this was. So first, we'll start with the text that I sent to Mom. I wrote that I dreamt about the birth of a Christ child. And what I mean by that is like basically a being with that selfless, powerful, joyful, loving, pure Christ energy that we might attribute to any number of prophets who have walked the earth. You can say that Jesus was one, Buddha, Muhammad, Mary Magdalene, like ascended beings, more advanced beings, more spiritually advanced beings who've come to earth from time to time to try to course correct civilization. That's what I believe. So this was the birth of another. And I didn't realize until the very end of the dream that it was a young girl. I was seeing the events through her eyes mostly, but then also kind of omnisciently, as an outside observer, which is very common in my dreams. And only at the very end of the dream was she revealed as a young Asian girl. I would guess maybe somewhere between the ages of 5 and 7. She sort of like popped up at the end with her arms wide open and this huge smile on her face. And she was wearing a kind of angled hat. And something about her birth, it said something about her birth being in Sweden or Switzerland, which I don't know what that's about, but could just be random, or it could actually be meaningful. I mean, certainly, I'm sure there are Asian people of Asian descent in Sweden and Switzerland, among their population, just like here. So, but that was the end of the dream. So I didn't know any of that yet, but I just knew that I was witnessing the birth of a Christ child who was pure joy. So I experienced her creation. I saw the dozens of people, beings, energetic beings, who were in on the plan to engineer her birth. They had to have been ancient, advanced, cosmic beings. They were powerful. I could feel the big energy and the joyful energy. And they gathered somewhere in space, in deep space. It was possibly a secret location. It may have been like a pocket or a fold in a dimension, in another dimension. But they traveled there. All of these different energetic beings traveled there by spaceship. And there were at least 50 or more spaceships in the sky. And they kind of all look like the Enterprise, Starship Enterprise, which is probably Spirit's way of letting me know they were spaceships because I'm a Star Trek fan, so they give you imagery that you know. So they all kind of looked like the Enterprise. And I saw them from a distance. I saw all the ships lining up, and they were in formation. So as they came in and they dropped off their passengers, then they like retreated into this formation. So it was like almost like a couple of circles but it was very orderly and patterned, and that was kind of marvelous to just look at on its own, just to see the the kind of organization, the kind of, I said it already, the symmetry, but there was a beauty to their arrival itself. I felt amazement. So that was really cool. All the ships coming in, and then at the end of the dream, when this birthing ritual was over, then all the ships one by one departed. They picked up their passengers from this space, this sort of room in space, in a fold, maybe in a dimensional fold, and then the ships left one by one, just as organized a fashion as they arrived, and they went in all different directions. So that's how I knew they were from wide and far across the universe. So actually, what this event was like, it was more like a party than anything else. I wrote that they each came separately from far away to the party, where they performed funny sketches and sang songs, one after the other. So it was kind of like a show. Before, it was a show and a ritual at the same time for the birth of this being, and so they performed funny sketches and sang songs that were joyful, but that also acknowledged the great struggle and sacrifices needed to save the world. So these beings were embracing and singing and crying. And when I say beings, I guess in some sense they had a basic humanoid appearance, but I didn't see like very specific features. I just sort of had an awareness of them as individual beings. They had sort of the body shape of a human being, but it wasn't like I really saw their faces clearly or anything like that. It was more their presences that I felt. And a little bit more about that in a bit too. So, for those of you wondering kind of what I saw, they were not super well defined, but definitely individuals coming together and supporting each other energetically in this celebration too. So their songs and their sketches acknowledge the great struggle and sacrifices needed to save the world. As the party continued, they realized that they all knew each other from ages ago, but not in their current incarnations. So this suggested to me that these beings had lived for a very long time. They had incarnations as different kinds of beings, maybe on different kinds of planets, and that their relationships to each other as like a support group for a spirit and a support group for the creation of somewhat angelic beings on planet Earth. They were associated a long time, and it was such that at the end of the dream, some of the people's appearances changed so that they recognized each other. Like, it was almost like they had one appearance when they walked in, like, okay, this is my current incarnation, but you knew me as this person, this being, and then the appearance would change, which we have heard is possible in spirit, that you can, as just pure energy, you can choose your appearance to others, and some will know you as you appear in one lifetime versus another lifetime. So that was kind of interesting, but it occurred more towards the end of the dream, that everybody, even though they were celebrating the whole time, they realized how long and deep their relationships were, and it just enriched the whole experience. It was cool. So like I said, it was both a reunion and a reaffirmation of their mission. There was much joyful crying, but it deepened the connections. The Christ child who was there, and I was looking through her eyes, didn't know she was a prophet, a savior of some kind yet, but she was being taught that she was, at this party. She was being, sort of initiated, and she was taught that she was going to go on this mission and that she was deserving. And then at one point, there was a being that seemed to be God, who was there in the form of a woman, another woman. And I know you like that, Diane. God is a woman. And I don't know, maybe like a middle-aged woman. And she had on a playful party mask, like one of those playful party masks, kind of like almost like a Catwoman kind of mask. And I don't know if the reason she was masked is because, like, what we hear sometimes in visions and things, you're not able to look directly into the eyes of God. Like, God is so bright. Like, God is like, the sun times a billion suns in pure essence or luminosity or pure being. And like, I mean, of course, in the afterlife, you don't have eyes, but theoretically, if you gaze into the visage of God, you'd go blind, as they've often said. So I don't know if that's why God was masked. And then God was kind of apologizing to the Christ child because God knew that it was going to be hard on her once she incarnated on earth, because her mission was against a lot of negative energies. And there were actually a small handful of negative energies at the party, but they were almost like isolated. And ironically, I think they were all grumpy old men. So make of that what you will, too. But there were maybe 4 of them out of maybe 50 or 100 beings there. And they were grumpy and unhappy, and they knew that they were losing this conflict. I don't know why they were even really allowed to be there. They weren't allowed really to participate. They didn't have any power in this environment. I guess maybe it's just to say that there is no, except for heaven, quote unquote heaven, there is no place where there is only one type of being. There's always a spectrum of beings, and also beings can change. So, maybe these people would change, but it seemed like these few negative energies that were there were withering. Like they were actually going to almost wither away and maybe even disintegrate. That was the sense I had of them. That was unusual, but it wasn't spooky because they were such a small part of the dream. So God is saying to the Christ child, I'm sorry about all the bad people in the world. And she said, I didn't color them all in, meaning all the people that God had created. I didn't color them all in, but I'm correcting that mistake, and I will. And then I had a sense of a lot of people in the world being in black and white, like that they were lacking color. I mean, literally as represented in the dream, but also lacking a depth of essence, and that perhaps God was admitting that God didn't make people well enough on the whole, and that God was aware of this fact, and that this was going to change, and that there was an effort being made to make souls better. It was interesting. So she said, I didn't color them all in, but I'm correcting that mistake, and I will. And then as she said that, a flash of red, a beautiful red, went across God's face. It kind of colored the mask and part of her face, and it was like God had been in black and white up until that moment in the dream, and then this streak of color came in, and it just illuminated the picture I saw, and it animated what God was trying to illustrate with words. So, and then God actually joked. She said, that she was promising to make human beings better. And then she said, and then she joked, after all, it only took a few days to make hell. And I have to think about what that joke means actually a little more. So thoughts welcome on that. But it was like an offhanded joke, like I'll work better. I'll work on human beings. After all, it only took me a couple of days to make hell. Like, and then hell was kind of shown as just like this gray space. It was just like floating there in the air. It was just like a sort of like a cloud, a dark cloud, and it looked not ominous, but just dull, lacking color and life and energy. Again, whether there's a literal hell, I couldn't say. I tend not to believe so, but I do think that there are energetic levels in heaven, and thus beings with low energy and low goodwill and good intent are gonna reside at a lower, probably less beautiful dimensional level than beings who are more ascended and more generous and loving and open, etc. So yeah, and the gray space that guy was joking about was hell, was separate. It was separate from Earth. It was separate from everything else, really, and it seemed very small. Excuse me. And as I mentioned, very few people at the cosmic gathering were naysayers, but they had no power to prevent the joyful plan to birth the Christ child. And in one of the little plays that these somewhat angelic beings put on, they were mocking the former president, Mr. 45, but they were doing it in such a clever way that it was above. It would have been above his head. He wouldn't have even known he was being mocked. It was so smart, and I can't tell you more than that because I don't remember. I just know that I remember thinking, this is so smart. They're so smart that, like, because he was kind of like present in an off room, like a side room. He wasn't in the main room, and he wasn't seen. I just sort of saw the edge of the room. So he had no effect or influence or power, and he certainly wasn't invited to the main party, but they were aware of his presence, and they were mocking him, as I said, in a way that was so clever that he wouldn't have even understood that he was being mocked, or possibly the implication was that he wouldn't have even understood how he was being undercut, how he was being outmaneuvered by spirit, because there was such joy in this little play they staged about his time here. It was interesting. And then I wrote, it was implied that they were smarter than he was without being like smarty pants about it, and that they would see that he would be defeated. But as I said, all these beings knew that sacrifice would be involved. At the end of the dream, the beings got in their spaceships one by one, and they departed. They waited in formation, departed in every direction away from the meeting place, the secret meeting place. Then the Christ child, then it was as if this was a dream that the Christ child was having, because the Christ child astral traveled back to her body and her bed, and she woke up in bed with the new knowledge of her purpose and her design. And that's when I realized that it was a girl in the first place, because she popped up in the air, smiling with her arms wide open and ready to make the world better. Like celebratory, like, here I am. And that's where the dream ended. And I hope I've properly communicated the energy of it. It just had a ton of juju to it. It really, when I woke, I had one of those wow moments, and my mom reacted similarly. When I wrote in the text at the end, strong juju dream, wowza. So she wrote back, holy cow, exclamation point, what a dream. I'd like to dream like that. Interesting and a thinker for sure. Wowza. And I said, yeah, it was a whopper. So, yeah, that's about it. My friend isn't here yet. I knew that she would take longer than she said. So I I managed to get this whole video together. Your comments are welcome. I hope that this balances off maybe the last video where, what was illustrated was something about more of the spoilery stuff that the negs are up to. This was such the opposite, and such a welcome feeling. And yeah, just that knowledge that these beings had of how hard it would be, but how noble a pursuit, how noble it would pursuit it would be too, to try to make the world a better place. And without getting too preachy, of course, it's on all of us all the time to try to embody that as much as we can, so that we're contributing that good energy to the world. That's what I got. I'll stop right there instead of babbling on. So again, comments, totally super welcome. Love to hear them. Likes and subscribes if you like. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you're well. And talk to you again soon. Bye.